Hi, my name is Paul Waring, and my studio space is located here, Tudor Lane, Cardiff. We have studios downstairs, and Fireworks Clay Studios is on the first floor, where I've been since 2007. The main themes of the work continue to be sort of the interconnectedness of nature and culture. More specifically, my relationship with nature, or human relationship as nature, with nature. Being based in Cardiff, I didn't realise quite how much the built environment was influencing my work until I spent time in Aberystwyth and in the landscape of West Wales and Ceredigion. So the landscape itself influenced the work and the ideas behind the work, primarily in changing the forms that I've been working with. So movement within the form became a prominent idea. Where I'd been previously making ellipses and cylinders, very static, symmetrical, calm, I now wanted to bring some sense of movement into the form. So the new forms, they twist, they also tilt, they may have undulating rims, they may have tapered rims. And I think all these explorations and all these changes with the form are my ways of trying to explore that sense of movement that I experience, that different engagement of my body through and with the landscape. It had a profound effect. So as the project developed and the forms developed, I stopped with the twisting and wanted to simplify the form so it related more directly to the ellipse that it had its ancestry in. So even though it might flare up into a wider ellipse or tilt to a sideways lean, it still related very strongly to its origins, which was within the very static ellipse. So the movement slowed down, the movement became a stillness, which is a contradiction, but I think it became a meditation on movement through stillness, or glacial movement, geological movement. I entitled the project Material Matters because I'd identified that what I wanted to do was develop my relationship with the materials that I work with as well. So I make my own glazes. One of the aspects of the project was to really kind of push my use of the glazes, my understanding of the materials, what they do, because I'd sort of, I'd been using these glazes for quite some time. Now, towards the end of the project, I'm still using those same glazes, but I've gone through a process of testing, using different glazes, layering glazes in different ways, different thicknesses, different oxides, just really sort of exploring. So the sense of discovery was very strong part of the project, to really kind of explore things, experiment with different materials. I suppose the underpinning aspect of my research, which is evidence of life. So it's those lived moments, which is why I use volatile materials that burst open and freeze in their blistered, cratered, cracked surfaces. They evidence action. I used to sort of, I suppose I'm still fascinated by ruins and the ruinous surface, but it's not in a maudlin or negative way. I think something interesting happens when presented with, say, a ruinous surface of decay. It doesn't make me necessarily think of death, it makes me appreciate life more. And the surfaces that I work with on the ceramics, for me, they talk about impermanence. For me, they talk about change. And that's very much about, our human experience. You know, our lives are impermanent, our lives are continually changing. I really enjoyed that about being in the rural landscape and the coastal landscape, is that these mountains that seemed so solid, unchangeable, were changing. Change is happening all the time, and I think it's, you know, that fascinates me because I find it so frightening at times. One of the big things that I'd identified that I wanted to work with and explore within the project was a different clay body. So I've worked with a grog stoneware kind of exclusively for 20 odd years since graduating. I've never worked with porcelain, but I was drawn to its whiteness. I wondered how that would affect the quality of the colours of the glazes that I was working with. I was interested in its ability to transmit light through its particles. So I wondered about sort of that interplay of the opaque glazes, the dense, visceral glazes, and how that would work with porcelain. As time went on, though, I kind of dropped the luminosity of it. I became far more interested in its tactile qualities. The smoothness of it I hadn't anticipated at all. It is just so seductive to work with. And its density is so different from a grogged stoneware body, which is very much more open. Because of the grog, it's a coarser body, whereas the particles of porcelain are that much closer together, and everything you do to it, it remembers, and it can remain as a mark on the body. Drawing has been an important part of the project. I started within the first week, within the first couple of days of being at Aberystwyth Arts Centre on the residency. I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing, and the surprise was the residual dust drawings that I was getting from the charcoal drawings of objects that I was doing with paper pinned to the wall. The charcoal was making a big mess on the floor, so I laid paper down to catch that dust, only to be tidy. What I've ended up with are accidental artworks, which for me are way more expressive. It was such an interesting experience of drawing these objects, of these kind of fantasy vessels in black charcoal, or very basic colour landscape drawings in pastel, and the pastel chalk falling to the floor, resting on the paper that was on the floor. I would pick the paper up and shake or lift or tilt, and the dust would fall at an angle or at different angles, rendering this emotional landscape. It was quite extraordinary. It was accidental, but once I realised what was happening, I then made choices and decisions about what I was going to do with it. So it became more deliberate. I still wanted that element of chance to come into it, that again, this was the material speaking. It wasn't necessarily my controlling it. I was controlling what was happening on the wall, not necessarily what was falling to the floor. Again, it was that partnership with materials. The first drawing I did, I'd kind of identified it as a fantasy journey. So it was 5 objects. And I think in my head what I was exploring was that sort of journey from culture to nature, from my work where it was to where my work may go. But during that journey of that drawing, I realised I didn't want to make rocks, because nature does that. I want to harness nature. I want to reference and talk about my relationship to it, but I don't necessarily just want to mimic it. The exhibition is due to open at Rhythin. It's extremely exciting, it's extremely nerve-wracking, but I'm really excited to see the work outside of the studio and in the gallery setting. I want to see how people respond to it as well. And I think for me, because the forms do lean and they move, and there is that sense of movement that has gone through the project and through the work, I want that to affect the viewer as well. I want the viewing experience to be an active one rather than a passive one. I'd love to see people bending down, looking at things from different angles, looking inward, looking round, just engaging. Because I think my previous work was so still, and it kind of conjured a stillness and, you know, put out a calmness. I'd like these to sort of have an impact that's a bit more dynamic.